Hello and welcome to the Work Inspired podcast. I'm your host, George Lucas Pfeiffer, and today's conversation features a very special guest. Jackie Wilcox is the Director of Interior Design for BKV Group, one of the world's leading design firms. She's here to talk with us about some of the changes in interior design, what makes a space one that people want to come to for work, and what are some of the disruptive technologies that are changing the game as it relates to workplaces. You're going to learn a lot in this conversation. Work Inspired starts right now. Jackie, thank you so much for being here. So excited to speak with you. Anytime we have someone from the design community come in, it's a thrill because your perspective and your insight is so relevant to what we do and the ultimate product that gets delivered to our customers.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I am honored to be on any platform that puts me in front of a lot of people. Honored and a little nervous, to be honest. I mentioned to you that this is my first time doing a podcast. So,
well, they're fortunately very easy. I was actually talking to a colleague this morning about this, and for some reason, the audio format is much more approachable. I come from a video background.
Yep.
And when you put someone in front of a camera, and now we're on a camera, but you put someone in front of a camera where they're looking into the lens.
Yes.
And I've been with incredibly intelligent people that have literally not been able to say their name.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
this will be easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So this is the question we always lead off with. We ask our guests to tell their professional story. So talk to me about how you got to where you're at today.
Yes. So going way back, I started at University of Illinois in Champaign and was a little unsure of architecture or psychology. So I ultimately was in the architecture program with several courses in psychology, and after learning that to do to be a full-on psychiatrist, you had to go to med school. I hate blood. So I was like, okay, decision made. Architecture it is. I'm sticking with it, and I loved it. It's quite a commitment, as many people know who've gone through architecture programs. And it was fun, but I think through that interest in psychology very early on, that has been something that I have feathered into not only the design of space, but the way that we approach the process of designing space and how we outreach with our clients and the people who will ultimately be occupying the space. So I've kind of held a special emphasis on that because of that very early on interest. And then kind of coming out of school, I started at an architecture firm here in Chicago, and really all of the firms I've worked at through my career have been here in Chicago. And kind of pushed me more and more towards interiors. And I still have this love for architecture, but really seeing inside of buildings is where I like to be. So, and that, again, the interest in psychology is what influenced that, because, people are mostly inside of buildings, and, people's perception of space, and, how the space makes them feel is very interesting to me.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, we always say that an investment in place is an investment in people, but truly understanding the needs and the impact a space has on the people that are in it is probably really crucial to creating a successful working environment.
Right. The way that I'm feeling because there's daylight in front of me, or how I'm feeling when I'm working surrounded by a lot of other people versus in a quiet room that's, acoustically soft. They all do such different things to you in any different type of mood you're looking to create. If I'm looking to be energized by my day, I'm going to sit myself right in the middle of town hall where people are passing and potentially stopping by to have a conversation, and that energizes me, whereas others might feel energized by being able to have that quiet and focus. So just approaching space in almost like psychology, every space needs to be different depending on who it's serving.
Let me ask a possibly complex question. Workspaces have changed over time. you can look back to the cubes, to the benches, to the social space, like they've changed.
Yes.
Have people, so you talk about psychology and the needs of a person.
Yeah.
Have the needs of a person in space changed, and that's why workspaces have changed, or have we just learned more about the needs of people that have always been fundamental, and we've tried to change the workplace to accommodate those fundamental needs?
Yeah. Wow, that is something to think about for a second. I think a little bit of both, if that makes sense. Or pre-pandemic, let's say, um, the workplace was so geared towards efficiency and productivity and kind of like the business's bottom line of how do we get innovation and productivity and efficiency to meld, and it was less about people's perception or the employee's perception of like, does this feel good to come to every day? Nobody really asks that question as frequently as they do now. At least how do we get people to like where they're going every day? And I think that metric has changed completely, where businesses are being forced to say, how do we get people to want to be here every day, and what is it going to be that does that? To go back to your question, like the world has changed, and it's forcing us all to change. Like, we are changing in that way. Our perception on it, our outlook on it is changing, and I think it's making us be better.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the work we're doing is changing, and it will continue to change. We'll talk a little bit about AI later, but yeah, it's interesting when you kind of try to find the balance of what's a fundamental need of a human. Daylight. You mentioned
Right.
daylight. That has not
Fundamental,
changed for
right?
throughout history.
Yeah.
Probably we've all needed the sun, right? To your point, is it also that there's new people at the table when you're making decisions around space? So maybe when you're looking at a bench where it's very much a cost per square foot per employee conversation, and it's a real estate decision. Now you've got people leaders that are weighing in,
Yep.
because there's this maybe elevated need to attract talent, or to
Right.
retain talent, or to get people to return to the office. And so maybe it's just new perspectives that are helping to usher in some of the changes we're seeing in the workplace.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're at BKV Group now.
Yes, yeah. So back to kind of my history.
Yeah.
So I'm at BKV Group as their interior design director. What brought me there is this kind of eclectic mix of a lot of different market segments, and I love to see this effect that each segment kind of has on the other. I'm there specifically in like this workplace position, and really to help bolster that market segment, but kind of being involved in our hospitality and our multifamily housing projects has certainly had a positive impact on how I think about corporate. And I've loved like kind of having that exposure.
And BKV that's kind of their specialty was hospitality, multifamily, residential.
Correct.
And so you're kind of trying, like you said, you're applying some of that to a growing corporate practice.
Correct.
How's that going?
It's great.
Yeah?
Yeah. We have a few projects locally, even like how we apply those principles to like a spec suite, I think is really crucial, because when you're looking at a spec suite, you don't have the end user there to talk to about it. And so you design through the lens of this broad umbrella of what is going to bring people here, what is going to just attract people to this space. And that's similar to like residential, it's comfort, and hospitality, it's this feeling like something special about your space, and so it's those principles, and applying it to something like a spec suite kind of puts it on another level, but having to do that at a budget, of course.
Of course, with the spec suite. Yep. This is going to be a two-parter, but talk to me a little bit about the culture at BKV, because I'm interested in that, and also in when you design something like a spec suite, how do you work company culture into that, or do you just leave? Because we've done a lot of spec suites too, and often it does come down to budget. And the nice thing about residential feel tie-in is that most people can get familiar with something that feels like home, right? We all have slightly different homes, but most of the time you can say, here's a workplace and here's a home. If you blend some of that together, I think it's a little bit of a one size fits all if you're talking about a spec suite that people
Right.
can feel good about.
Right.
But first tell me about the culture at
At
BKV.
BKV,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're a multidisciplinary firm that has offices in Minneapolis, Washington D.C., Dallas, and Chicago. And so we have these satellite offices, and combined we're about 200 plus people. Locally in Chicago, we're at about 30.
Mhm.
And it's made up of both architects and interior designers. And so our workplace culture locally is really great.
Mhm.
There is a certain energy when people are coming into the office, but we're still functioning hybrid. So people have the freedom to kind of do what the day suits them
Mhm.
to do. But I always like being in the office and kind of feeding off of the creativity and energy of the people around me. And so I think that the industry we're in kind of requires that to do our best work.
Mhm.
But globally or nationally, we'll say, and we do have a Vietnam office too, so we are global. I have not been there yet. One day, bucket list. Our firm culture nationally, so locally we're about 30, feels kind of like mid-range firm,
Mhm.
a little kind of mom and pop shoppy, which is great. But we have this like 200 plus person firm as a kind of larger safety net to kind of a various amount of expertise and backgrounds that really kind of like anything you need for a project, we really kind of have that type of resource,
Mhm.
which has been great, and has like a really positive impact on all the projects we work on.
Yeah, so you've got the large company resources and capability, but you've got
Yep.
the local that size is pretty nice
It
because you can
is.
really get to know everybody, really
Yep.
form great working relationships.
Right.
And you've spent your whole design career here in Chicago.
Yes.
Is
Yep.
the Chicago team, does it feel like Chicago? Like we've got a couple of design programs, one profiles in design. We ask like what makes Chicago special? Does it feel like you found a good home at a Chicago design firm?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I have loved all of the Chicago design firms that I've worked at for different reasons. What I like about kind of living and working in Chicago is all of the neighborhoods,
Mm.
and like that's discovering even more about the neighborhoods through the people I work with,
Mm.
and having those conversations. And there are a lot of people at BKV and even a lot of the firms I worked at locally that have people from different states
Mhm.
too. I always like hearing people's background and like understanding where they came from, and really that makes you a better team leader when you know where your team is from and what they've experienced, and having an office space to facilitate those conversations and bring your team members closer together is so important. So again, like kind of going back to the office, but if you're never able to have those casual conversations with your coworkers, like where did you grow up? Where
Mhm.
did you go to college? What was your college experience like? And if you're not able to do that over the water cooler, then you lose something about team bonding.
Yeah, and it goes back to that psychology piece. It's
Right.
harder to understand someone through a screen than it is when
Right.
we're sitting right next
Right.
to each other, right?
Yes,
Working
exactly.
together. So we talked about the changing workplace, post-pandemic workspaces. What are business leaders telling you is important to them? What do people want right now?
The crazy thing is, like, I don't think people really know
Mm.
what to ask for. They know that they want people to come back into the office. Like, they know to ask for that. How that translates to their people and their office is not a one size fits all
Mm.
answer. And so I think it takes, and this goes back to the process that I mentioned. Like, there's some psychology in the process of
Yeah.
extracting that from any group that we're working with too. I think understanding at an acute level the people that we're working with, and not just like the leaders of the people, but actually bringing in end users who are sitting in the benching seating, sitting in the private office or the conference space, and hearing from them directly what will make them feel productive and efficient in the office, because that's still something people want. Nobody wants to go into the office and feel like they've wasted a day. So what is it that's going to make you feel productive when you're in the office and feel like you're making a connection with your brand and your work culture and the people around you? And so that really requires, like my process has been to really like have a good workshop, like a long time with the people that I'm designing for, and getting to know them and what makes them tick, and getting to know about the business models of the companies that we're working with and the groups that we're working with, and to be able to say, okay, through this exercise or through this workshop, I see that your group will do best with a lot of these like open collaborative areas, because you're all very social, and that's where your innovation is going to happen, is when you can turn your chair around and like come to a table with the others around you. Whereas there might be groups where you're able to find that like the more of like the heads down is better for them, and their business is focused around technology. So huddle rooms with the best technology that you can close a door and get some quiet is more suited to that group. So kind of not a one size fits all.
Are you finding that leaders have a desire to bring people back together, or is that a mixed bag as well? Are people unsure as to whether or not they need their office?
The answer to that is nuanced, because like we've proven that we can work from home, and I think people are speaking up that they like this hybrid world. And so it's about balancing, making people's day-to-day life just happy, like, and feeling happy with the place you're working in. And does that mean that I'm working from home 2 days a week? Probably. Like, and I haven't really talked to many people who are like, we're going back 5 days, and I am so excited about it. And so I think that you talk about like, are we changing, or is the atmosphere getting better? I think we need to change, like, as business leaders, to say like, how can I make my people efficient even though I'm not staring down their back 24/7, So I think it's a challenge for just like managers, really, to make sure that we're setting our people up in the best way possible to be efficient from both home and in the office, or from a coffee shop, or from wherever.
I completely agree. I think especially for middle managers, because often C-level has their management team come in, and there's probably fewer of them. The middle managers have larger teams that report to them, and they're more dispersed, it seems. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges during the pandemic. And I think I mentioned this on a previous recording. I can't remember, but I'll restate it because I think it's so significant. Is we recently polled some graduating seniors, and the data was really interesting in that I think it's because they went to school during the pandemic and experienced the downfall of remote learning and development, and they had part of their college experience be completely isolated in a dorm or at their parents' house. They want to go to the office. Like, they want to come back in, not 5 days a week, maybe like you said, but one of the questions we asked was, would you accept less money, less salary to work for a company that offered remote working? And 2% only said yes. Then we said, would you accept less salary for a company that offered flexible working? And like over 50% or something like that said yes. So significantly more. It's like they don't want it fully remote. They want in person. They just don't want it the same as it was before. And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes whatever generation, the millennials, the ones that worked before the pandemic and then went home and had a few years at fully remote. Those seem to be the ones that are struggling to want to come back as much as leadership might want them to, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting you say that about like just the younger crowd coming out of school right now. We have some junior designers in our office that have vocalized to me that like we'll have a like a closed door, like collaborative session where we get into a conference room and pull out drawings and leading up to like kind of designing and detailing, where like, like I'm drawing out details on sketch paper and talking through like, like you have this idea for this, but junior staff needs some guidance on like how to take it from concept to actually buildable. And so with my team members, I think those are our favorite moments, like mine too, when we're all together and bouncing these ideas off one another, and I can come to the table with my idea, like, okay, that idea is great. Here's the detail for how it will actually get built now. And they have been like, those are fun days. Like I had fun doing that because like, like they don't always know like how things come together. And I'm learning again what's cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think that's so, I mean, because, we talked about culture. That's a big driver. It's easier to create a culture where people are together throughout human history. That's how cultures have been defined and promoted and acted on. But then also the development, the learning, the progress, innovation. We'll talk about, some tech, disruptive tech, but there's just so many reasons why. But I think without flexibility, that kind of seems to trump
it's
all those reasons.
right,
Yeah.
right. I think like people don't want to feel, and it goes from being like a junior employee to mid-range to senior, is like nobody wants to feel like they're being controlled,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like having some freedom in your life is nice, and being able to kind of pick up and go take a run in the middle of the day if you're feeling like you mentally need it
Mm.
is nice to be able to do it. And I think those are the advantages that we've gained through the pandemic that nobody wants to give up now.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And you said, and so when you're talking to business leaders or people that are making space decisions, that's one of the top challenges is creating a space to get that people want to go to. Is
Right.
that, yep.
I
So,
think so.
so what are some of the ways you mentioned along a session where you can really understand their needs? So you can create a space that accommodates those needs.
Yep.
Are you using listening tools? Are you doing pulse surveys of their team? Are
It's a
you,
lot of different
yeah.
things. Yeah, I mean, it's poll surveys, it's looking at
Mm.
precedents, and other things too, just like icebreaker activities where you're getting to know a little bit about them. For one group, it was a tech company where we did this discovery process, and we'd put like several images on screen of like, one was a very clean office looking modern, like nothing on the tables anywhere, and the other one was more quirky. It had papers posted on note boards, and like artwork on the walls, and we asked, tell us, show of hands, like what space do you prefer, A or B? And we learned something from each group, and it's different. I've done the same exercise with so many different groups, and some people like the cleanliness. They're like, I would not be able to work with all this stuff around me. It would make me nervous, and I would want to clean it. And then there are other groups who lean in the more creative side, who are like, I need to be surrounded by things that inspire me. And that means like posting stuff all over.
Mhm.
And so you have those conversations with people through doing things like that you wouldn't get through giving them a PDF that says what type of space you want, because they don't know how to ask for that
Right.
until you're having a conversation over some sort of like image or discussion point like that.
It makes sense. We saw before the pandemic, it felt like we had to sell a little bit harder. During the pandemic, it really changed where people were saying, I don't know. I don't know what, like, I don't, tell me what my peers are doing. Tell me what the office of the future
Yep.
looks like. Tell me how to navigate this change. Like they were asking, like we
Yeah.
didn't have to go knocking on their door. They were
Right.
coming to us. And that's a good thing because I think people are shedding some, whatever thoughts they had or structure that was in place before. There's openings to change now that I feel like weren't there before, and that's a good thing, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I always say it's not a when we're designing for new projects, it's not, oh well, what did we do before? Like that, I think so many business leaders and people in this process are like, well, how did we do it on that project? How did we do it on that project? And I think you hear that less now, because the whole like paradigm has changed and everybody knows it, and it's less about, well, what did we do before and what are we going to do to get this result in the future.
When it relates to culture, do you find that most business leaders have a strong sense for what they want their culture to be? And that sometimes you're helping them identify if there's a disconnect between what they want their culture to be and what their culture is? Or do you
Yep.
find that they actually have a pretty strong culture, but they're unsure as to how it translates into something like a floor plate design or
Yes.
furniture selection?
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's where I think our design teams really bridge the gap, is translating like what their culture and brand is and how does that translate to like, a floor plan.
Right.
And like you said, some firm leaders in this tech company, I'm using it as a precedence, they had said, I want my culture to look like this. It currently doesn't, but I want it to be like this. And so, it's understanding like what their culture looks like today, to know how to design their space to maybe bring people out of their shells and not have them, heads down in a workspace. And what are those amenities going to be that do that and like get people to come out and socialize or collaborate more.
What are some of those? When in our planning call, you talked about some unique new components of a corporate space that we hadn't heard of before. So
Yeah. Well, I'm going to use Barstool as an example because we just finished this project here in Chicago, and it's kind of the like amenities on steroids space, because it's got a full-size basketball court, a golf sim, several different like lounge beverage areas. It's got a VIP room that overlooks the court. And so really for that space, it was all about getting people away from their desks. Actually, their business heads did not want them behind the computer all day. They want them creating content and using kind of this creative direct backdrop to do it. And so I think that what was the original question about amenities?
Yeah,
and how we identify amenities, right?
Yeah.
And so for them, that's how we identified the amenities was, what is the creative backdrop that will get you away from your desk? And for, again, like any given firm, it might look a little bit different. This tech company in Minneapolis, we found through the discovery process that there's certain departments that every day or like every other day after work, they go to this one dive bar in the neighborhood, and it's just their team building thing. And so part of that was like recreating that dive bar feel somewhere in the office for them, that celebration of their culture right there in front of them. And for other groups, and sometimes it goes by department. Like there are so many companies that have multiple departments of personalities that are all different. And so then other departments, they were like, well, we want to come into a place that's dark and the lighting is dim and that was like, you could tell that they go home and do like gaming. But they were like the IT group who were like, we just like, we want our screens, we want it to be dark because we can't see if there's too much daylight, so
make sure the chairs are comfortable because we're gonna be sitting for a long time.
We're like, okay, sure. So it's through having all of those conversations, the people who liked it dark, it was just having craft coffee, give us good coffee and we're happy. And for other groups, it was like, I need the creative space to kind of pull it out of me. And what does that look like?
I love how all this kind of goes back to your psychology introduction, because I was going to ask you, so really we got to figure out what makes people happy, right? And that's how we get them to come in.
Yes.
And then I was like, well, we're businesses, we need to be profitable. Shouldn't we be concerned about what makes people productive those are the same thing, because if you're
Yes.
happy and you're at work, you're engaged and you're more productive. I mean, there's tons of studies that show that to be true, right?
Right, right.
And Barstool is a good example. I saw the tour. It's a great looking space. It's like a warehouse of fun. I can hear a listener that's a business owner that's not in a industry that doesn't have a business that's like Barstool Sports
Right.
saying, well, that's because that's what they do. We're not dude perfect. We're not like running around, like Mr.
Creating
Beast,
content, right.
just creating content everywhere
Right.
for a certain audience type. So how do you like take a portion of that, or how do you find the right amount of that kind of, let's make it fun, because what you don't want is the ping pong table that sits there unused, because the culture is such that if you pick up that paddle, you're going to be criticized, because how
Right.
dare you be playing ping pong when you could be
Right,
at your
right.
computer working.
It's like, right, don't tease everybody with like what you cannot play with
Yeah.
in the middle of the office.
Yeah.
I think for those firms that their business looks different than Barstool, for example, I have a project where it's a law office, completely different, right? What will make people feel productive and happy every day is just a really well-designed space. And so again, so now we're kind of like veering into like that hospitality influence.
Yeah.
So like what you're walking into every day makes you feel special. And it's a treat. And that could come through with just a very like well-designed, nice designed space, or it's, you're getting a chef's kitchen in your office where like you have a chef that's like cooking meals for you, and you're getting that kind of like higher level hospitality treatment in your office, but doesn't necessarily say like, here, go shoot pool all day.
Yeah. And it's interesting too at this time, because there's such a, like, the work life intertwine is so relevant to the conversations we're having when it comes to how do you get people back in, or how do you create a space that will attract the right talent, and I think you said it before, every organization is going to have a different answer to that. So to what levels do you want to have those intertwined? But if you want a space that's incredibly corporate, people are still people, and when they leave, then they're going to want to go have their home life, right? Or on Friday they might want to have their home, but if you create a space that blends those two things together, which Barstool seems to have done that very well, people might say, well, I'd rather be here because there's way cooler stuff here, and I get that feeling of mixing things I'm passionate about personally and professionally.
Right. Yeah. And like, we haven't really touched on health and wellness yet. And we were doing our professional photo shoot for Barstool a few weekends ago. And it was a Friday, and we were there shooting until 6:37 on a Friday. And the staff was there playing basketball. Like they were using the court. I did not see one moment throughout the entire day that the golf sim wasn't being used too. So I think integrating these moments of like health and wellness too. And, you can go to work and feel like you're not just being productive in your workday, but also like keeping yourself healthy and fit. And how does that integrate to the day as well?
Is there a element of the stereotype of the tech startup? Have you seen Silicon Valley, the show?
Yes,
Silicon Valley?
yes,
So like,
love it.
I love that show too. But there's this like kind of notion, I think, where just all this VC money gets dumped in, and there's candy machines everywhere, and people are taking naps, in their nap pods, and maybe more established business or the larger corporations that's just saying, that's a flash in the pan. Like, that's not sustainable. That's not like how do you talk to business owners that they know they want some of that, right? They know they need to attract people back in, but they also are realistic, is that like, we need to do our work still and keep the lights on, and because the most valuable thing we're offering to people is jobs, right? So especially as the economy is maybe a little bit, who knows what it's going to do next year, but like how do you have that conversation?
Right. And I think it's a balance of like the technology and collaborative space. So, I mean, thinking of like the amenity spaces, not just as a place for people to go mess around for a few hours and like shoot pool, but how are they places where, like you can pull your laptop there, and you're in this very hospitality like setting with your laptop, and you grab a kombucha from the taps, and you go and have a conversation with your team members out in the open. That's a conference space, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just like a pool hall. It's you're a space that you're using to facilitate a conversation about how people are going to do their work that day. And that can be any space. I mean, the other areas that are like pool tables and stuff, if it's that type of firm, or if it's that type of company like Barstool with the basketball court, you're building a sense of team and community and culture through just spending time with one another in the space. And so this is another project example that was a firm group here in Chicago that I had worked on with a previous firm. It was a logistics company, and the project was about, like, as we started to design it, was creating this sense of like FOMO that you're not in the office, because they were targeting kind of the young people coming out of school. And so it was like creating these moments where people in the office might be like posting on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And the people at home are seeing the people in the office post things, and they're feeling like, I'm missing out on this opportunity to like be with my coworkers or make friends or form connections. And so like that in itself is, like something that could bring people into the office.
I think it's a good example. I mean, FOMO has maybe a negative connotation to it, but like that is the college campus, right? Like you want to get out of your dorm room and go be involved because that's what everybody's doing. That's how you meet people and make new relationships and learn. But I'm interested, we've been talking about a little bit about technology. AI is probably the top conversation piece on this season of the podcast, or this half season at least. Do you think it's going to impact design and the A&D industry at all?
Yes.
I thought you'd
think
say
so.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I already see like I'm already getting like spam ads for like, look, you send a photo in of your space and it's all unfinished, and it shoots out like renderings of your space in 10 different styles and looks. That's great and all. And I think that, like thinking through ChatGPT and like what it does, it's all about learning how to harness these tools in a way that's productive to us and make it still, tell the story that we want to tell for any given project. Because, AI doesn't know the story or doesn't have the ability to converse with the people in like a workshop form. And AI doesn't really know how to like discover the intangible. Like you can pose it with questions and problems and it'll come up with solutions, but what if you don't know how to ask the question because you don't know the problem that you have,
right?
And so I think it takes that kind of like human experience to be able to even say, aha, you guys have a problem with this. I can see that through our conversation. Maybe one day AI will be able to do that, and that's an interesting day.
Yeah. Well, everyone's got their own opinion on it, and it's obviously coming quick, so I think we'll have more insight into its real impact.
Right.
And not just the opportunities it presents, but also some of the risks and challenges that will come along with it.
Yep.
But I think it could be relevant in helping designers and and space decision makers have more options, have more information, maybe move faster. But I also think there's a component of it that's what you talked about with companies, where each company is a little bit different, and you need to understand that company to make a space that's most effective for them. And the byproduct of that is each person at the company is unique, right? So not every single, each of us is
Right.
different in how we work and how we think. And I think about the watch on my hand and how it tells me I've sat too much, get up and move, It seems like it could be, coming that this also measures my productivity and my focus and my
Right.
engagement level,
Yep.
and it says, you're the type of person that can't sit in a cube for 8 hours a day. You're 40% more productive if you spend 2 hours in a
Yeah.
coffee shop type setting.
Yep.
It would almost coach us to say, here's where
It's
you should be working to be
right.
your best, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is so interesting too, because it's almost like we're becoming robots.
Yeah.
We're humans, but
I
we're
know,
becoming
I
robots. Our
know.
watch is really telling us what to do all day, right?
Well, then you have the rebels that would be like, I'm going to do the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But I think more so there's so much data that's being
Yeah.
generated now. And I
Right.
think that's just going to keep accelerating. I think the successful firms or service providers will be the ones that can take that data and in some way make it meaningful. And
Yes.
to your point,
Yes.
that's going to require a coach. It's going to require experience. It's going to require a consultant because most people aren't going to want to. Big organizations can't make sense of all this data right now, let alone an individual that's got 100 other things and kids and all the other things to do. So
Right.
I think there's a lot of opportunity in that, and we'll see how
it's coming.
Yeah, it is.
And the change is inevitable, so you might as well figure out how to use it.
Yes, exactly. Get a golf simulator.
Yeah.
What's something you're looking forward to in the next 12 months?
This is a good
Winter
one.
in Chicago?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I just thought ahead. I'm like, well, we've got January,
Yeah.
February, March, April.
So you're looking forward to the spring.
Here's what I'm looking forward to. This is good. I'm looking forward to finding an opportunity to travel to some other one of our
Vietnam.
branches. Right. There we go. I like where your head's at. No. I mentioned BKV has several different branches. I frequent Minneapolis, but haven't been to the Dallas or the DC group. And kind of like as we look at outreach outside of the Midwest, I think that's something that I'm looking forward to is figuring out how we take more of our corporate work elsewhere into some of the more busy markets, because Chicago isn't as busy as, let's say Dallas.
Sure.
So
makes sense. We ask every guest if there's a resource that's been valuable to you in your career. What would it be that you could recommend to others?
A resource that's been mentors, just the people who have kind of helped me become who I am, and it's not like without their time and energy and support that I would be here today at all. Or, and it's been varied. There's certain people who have had the patience to sit with me to show me how to put things together in detail. And then there's those who have given me the confidence to be bold. And so I think that's my resource is mentors.
It's a great one. And we've heard that before. And I know you sit on panels and you're obviously on this podcast. So sharing your insights and your expertise, I think, is one way that you're doing that for others less directly than a peer mentor or mentoree relationship. But thank you for doing that and being here. Final question.
Yep.
If you were going to retire tomorrow, which clearly you're not, but if you were, what's some advice you'd leave your team?
Just help each other. Help each other. Be honest with one another. I think honesty, when it's hard to get brutal honesty from the people you work with, even like to receive it. But when you do it in a constructive way, you grow from it. And so I think just be honest, help each other grow, and that's probably
that's
it.
great.
Yeah,
that's enough. I mean, that's great feedback. Great advice. Well, Jackie, thank you so much. It's been an awesome conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think we could probably talk about the future and about what's going on for hours and hours, but you've shared some really, really incredible insights. So thanks for being here.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed. and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.